Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
This episode is brought to you by Pepsi Wild Cherry. Pepsi Wild Cherry is bursting with delicious cherry flavor and a sweet, crisp taste that gives you more to go wild for. Getting wild may look different these days, but whether it's opting for a solo Friday binge watch or a big night out, everyone can indulge in their wild side with Pepsi Wild Cherry. Also available in Zero Sugar. So grab a Pepsi Wild Cherry and get wild.
Hi there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode 536 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. You know what, folks? You asked, and we have answered. Our content today is mostly going to be, actually, I guess we asked, and you answered. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, strike that. Reverse it.
Right, reverse
Willy
it.
Wonka would say.
Yeah, we last episode, if you missed it, we talked a little bit about crazy wild predictions for the upcoming Duke basketball season. And we got a lot of you who responded both in the Duke Basketball Report forums and to our email address at dbrpodcast@gmail.com. And we're going to read some of those to you. We're going to comment on them. It's good stuff.
Wait,
Plus,
and Jason, we're gonna grade them too. We have a percentage scale. So some of them, like, hey, you might have thought there was like, oh, this is really bold. We're gonna grade them, ladies and gentlemen. We're not gonna be too harsh, but we have to issue something. We can't just sit there and let it lie. We got to talk.
Exactly. And by the way, a little later on, we're going to be previewing Duke's next football game, the undefeated Duke Blue Devils taking on the UConn Huskies. We'll have a look ahead to that. And by the way, I jumped into all this. I'm Jason. He's Donald. Sam again can't be with us. You know, Donald, the problem with Sam is he's a hardworking man. He is just too busy with his job these days, unlike you and me, right?
I don't work, so that's just how it is. But no, we miss Sam, and we want we want him back on the show. We'll have him back very, very soon once we get the scheduling kind of worked out a little bit. But for now, you just get Jason and I. And I know a lot of people are like, "Damn." But we're gonna try and get through this.
All right, so let's start with, as promised, on the last episode. If you haven't listened to 535, go listen to 535 so you'll know what I'm talking about. I said I wanted crazy, wild predictions for the upcoming Blue Devils season. These should not be things that you're confident and are going to happen. These are things that are like a little bit like, maybe, maybe, has a shot at happening. So let's go through some of them. The very first one is from Manny Matthews, who came to us with this one. And I think both Donald and I really hopped on this. He said his prediction, Duke will set a school record this year for the most three-point shots attempted and made in a season. And Manny went on to say he just looks at this lineup and sees everyone in it being a threat from long range, and he thinks the team's going to be bombing away. I think maybe he's thinking a little bit about Jon Scheyer's career. Jon Scheyer, a prolific three-point shooter at Duke, and now that Jon Scheyer is putting his imprint more and more on, on who's on the roster, Scheyer has recruited a lot of guys who can shoot from the perimeter. So Donald, step one in this process, give me a number, a percentage from 1 to 100 on Manny's prediction that Duke will set a record for the most 3 points a shots attempted this season.
So we're talking about shots attempted or shots made?
He said attempted and made. Either way.
We're going to go with made.
I don't know that they are. To me, those are very similar kind of numbers.
Right. And I don't really care if we go 100%, if we go 100% and set the record, that's fine. Right. So let's go with made, because I did some research on this when Manny, this is probably in my mind, the favorite of mine, because we both, like you said, Jason, jumped on it. And I did some research on this. First, I made a guess and that guess was correct. Jason Ives, you know this, so I'm not going to ask you this question.
This is true.
But for those out there, the team that has the most three-pointers made in a season, and remember, the three-point line only goes back like 35 years. The team with the most is the 2000-2001 team, our favorite team. We have Return to Glory. We could, we have all that. This is my favorite team. And I picked it immediately because I knew that when JJ Redick set the record for most threes in a season at Duke, he passed two players on the 2000-2001 team who made their marks during that season. That was Jason Williams. He had 132 three-pointers. Shane Battier had 124. That team total had 407 three-pointers made. Now, Jason, that is a lot of three-pointers. That is 10.4 threes made per game. No one has come close to that. The 2015-16 team is the second most. They have 326. That was led by Grayson Allen with 90 and Brendan Ingram with 80. So, Jason, I'm putting this at 10%. That is not because I don't think this team will be prolific. I think that is an otherworldly type of, productivity from beyond the arc. And Jason, if you remember, like back then, Shane Battier set the record at that point, which has since been broken by JJ, of three-pointers in a game. He had 9 in one game against Princeton. It was the second game of the year. I believe that was the same game where Coach K got his 500th win at Duke, and then the court was named immediately after him. That was the second game that I had at Duke. But also, he did that like 7-8 times. He had like 8-9 three-pointers in a game. Yeah. So this team was just like every game it was somebody. And don't forget, you had Mike Dunleavy, you had Chris Duhon, and you had Nate James all making threes. They weren't making nearly as many as those guys, but they were still able to make them. So you had a bunch of guys who at any given point who could make threes. That is a big bar to set. And while I believe in this team, and I think they're going to be productive from beyond the three-point line, to get to 407 and to hit 10 per game, I feel like we have a lot of inside guys that are going to get buckets. And so I think the scoring is going to be a little bit more distributed. So I'm going to go at 10%. But Manny, I would love to be wrong, because if we're going to hit 400 threes, you know what happened in 2001? We won a national championship. That's going to happen again this year if we do that.
Yeah, I would even go a little less than 10%. I think I'm probably down in the 5, maybe 7% kind of range, because I think that this team actually has a lot of guys who are going to put the ball on the floor. It's not just big men scoring in the post. It's guys who are going to put the ball on the floor and try and get into the lane and stuff like that. And I actually think, I'm not so sure that we have as many shooters maybe as Manny thinks we do. Look, I love Tyrese Proctor. I love Jeremy Roach. I'm not sure either one of those guys are guys who want to put the ball up 5, 6 three-pointers a game, 7 three-pointers a game. I'm not sure they want to take quite that many. I don't know that Kyle Filipowski is going to take quite that many. So I sort of feel like, we got some guys on the bench. Look, I think Jared McCain's going to take a lot. I think Jaden Schutt, when he plays, is going to take a lot of threes, but I just don't think we're going to quite get there to meet the number of that 2001 team. Just like you, I did some research, and that 2001 team absolutely sticks out so far. They are like another order of magnitude more than any other team. I wasn't looking at total. I was looking at average, because I sort of feel like average is a better metric. A team could play fewer games and be, like let's say in 2021, sorry, when we had the shortened COVID season, if that team had been bombing away, it'd be unfair to say, oh no, they weren't the most prolific 3-point shooting team, because they played, like 10, 15 fewer games than usual for a Duke team. So I looked at the average, and just to put this in perspective, the next highest team after the 2001 team is actually, in terms of three-pointers attempted, was 2008. They attempted 24 per game in 2008. And there are a whole bunch of Duke teams that are like 23.8, 23.6, that kind of number. So the gap from 2008 to 2001 is 24 in 2008, 27 three-pointers per game in 2001. So like I say, it's a big jump. And I think it's possible that this year we will be up in the, in that 23 kind of range in terms of a number of attempts per game. But I don't think we're going to reach the numbers of that 2001 team. It is worth noting, like I said, obviously that 2001 team was a great team, up there, top 3 in Duke history. We're not going to get into that debate right now. And it could make you think, oh, shooting 3-pointers is one of the keys to success. But like I said, the number 2 team is that 2008 team. And Greg Paulus, Kyle Singler, John Shire, Taylor King, DeMarcus Nelson were all guys firing away on that team. 2008 was not a good year for Duke. That was a team that really struggled. And they took a ton of 3-pointers. So that sort of shows you this is not necessarily a stat where you go, oh, this is something you can connect to success.
Also, Jason, the keys between, again, going back to 3-pointers made, which is the research that I did, 2001, in earnest, only 5 guys were hitting threes that year. The 5 guys that I mentioned. In 2015, 2016, there were only 5 guys that made 3-pointers the entire season. This is not the season that Marshall Plumlee hit the lone 3, but from, on a roster of 14 or 15 guys, only 5 made threes. I think what Manny's going for, at least, is that there are more guys on this team that feel like they're capable of hitting threes in the course of a given season, right? But there's still got to be a guy who's going to be prolific, like hitting, again, Grayson Allen hit 90, and he's not even in the top 5 of Duke seasons from 3. So you have to have a guy who's really going up towards 100 and 110, and then have a guy kind of on his heels to even have a chance at that 2001 team. Because again, they had that year, Jason Williams, 132 threes. He was second in all of college. Shane Battier was right behind him, third in all of college. So you're talking some stratospheric type of numbers to get close to that team. So I would love to be, inching towards that, but I think the way that this team is balanced, you're going to have a lot of guys go into the paint. You have a lot of guys, like you said, Jason, who are going to be driving 3-pointers. If we can hit 40 to 45%, it may not matter how many we take, because they'll be efficient in how they take them, and it'll be leading to other points of the offense where we're going to be getting points.
Dude, 40% would be unreal. Duke's not going to. I'll tell you right now, I don't think Duke's going to hit 40%. That's a big, big number. Like, if you tell me that Duke is hitting 38% of their threes, this team's cutting down some nets. I'll tell you that right now. All right, so Manny, great question. We love that one. Let's move on to the next one we're going to highlight here, which comes from Scott Rich, Scott Dude on the DBR forums. And he says his prediction is that Ryan Young will average 12 plus minutes per game this season, and that Ryan will have at least 2 games in ACC play where he will play more than 20 minutes. What do you think about this prediction?
You know what? I actually don't think this is as wild a prediction as people think. I would give this probably 50%. I say that because I was gonna say,
I agree with you. I feel like when Scott put that out there, I was like, it's not that I asked for bold predictions, man. This way, I fully expect those are about the numbers that I expect from Ryan Young. You're saying 50%. I think it's more like 60+%.
Yeah, 12 points a game. I mean, Jason, we could do some research while we're talking here, but I'm
12 minutes per game.
I'm sorry, 12 plus minutes per game. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I think he was at that, right around that, higher than that last year, right? He was, he had some minutes. He started a few games. Remember to start the season because of some injuries that we had. He was dominant. He led the team in scoring one game, right? Like he had some moments where he was on the floor quite a bit, and even down the stretch in the ACC play, we had moments where he was on the court down the stretch. I think he's going to get these minutes, and I think there's going to be a couple of games where he's going to get 20 plus. Now, I know the caveat is Scott said it was going to be during ACC play, and I do think that there are a couple of games where that could happen. Of course, we need to see the schedule, but also, Jason, I think also with these back-to-backs that we will have, and I know we're going to have at least one, that Saturday, Monday back-to-back, that's the opportunity where you're going to have some guys that were on the bench on that first game getting some minutes in the second game, especially early on in the season when you have the freshmen that can come and kind of relieve some of the starters and make it where they don't have to play 40 minutes and 40 minutes in 2 games in 48 hours.
Yeah. By the way, Ryan Young last year, you asked about it. He averaged 17.7 minutes per game. So predicting 12 minutes per game this season would be a less. And I do think he very well may play less. I mean, the big man rotation is going to be very different this year from what it was last year. But bottom line is, Scott, I ding you, my friend, for not making a truly bold prediction. Both of us think this is 50% plus odds of happening. Speaking of Ryan Young, Mountain Devil had this prediction. He said that Ryan Young will lead the team in scoring at least once. And he said, and that will elevate Ryan Young to Nate Janes level of fan favorite. I'm going to go first on this one. Just kind of like what Scott just did. I'm like, yeah, Ryan Young leading the team in scoring. Again, I'll take about a 50% chance of that happening. I don't think that is that unlikely. Especially I think in some of these early season games where I think it's more likely that Ryan's probably going to be starting. He did it last year. I see no reason why he won't do it this year. What do you think?
I put this at like 80%. Like I almost think this is going to happen. And I say that because he did it last year. I think he did it more than once. I think there was one time he tied with Tyrese Proctor. I think there's one time he tied with Jalen Blanks for the team lead in points for a game. And so he's done it multiple times. I have no reason to suspect he wouldn't do it again in this season, especially early in the season. That is when teams kind of, rely on veteranship, veteran play and leadership, right? He's going to be one of those guys that's going to be on the floor early in the season as some of these younger, freshmen come along. They may not come along as fast as, many people expect. So that's going to happen. So I think this is going to be, 80%, but also Jason, the Nate James level of fan favorite.
Yeah.
I'm putting this at 100% because I think he's there. I think he's, Nate James
podcast has lifted him. Yeah.
The podcast has lifted him, but also before that, right? Like he is easily in very quick fashion become one of the most heralded fan favorite players that I've seen at Duke since, in a long time. I think that's great for him. The fact that he came in and came off the bench and, was so efficient, I think endeared him to a lot of fans very quickly. And I don't see that, dissipating. And hey, Jason, if we go ahead and win it all, just walk it off. He can, we could put his name. We have to give him a nickname. I think that's where we're going, right? Like Nate James is a badass. We have to. I don't know if Ryan Young has a nickname that we can bestow upon him that would fit the leadership and just what he brings to the table. But the fact that he is here at Duke is one of the best decisions that this coaching staff has made in a very long time.
I feel like his nickname is YMCA. Everyone just, I mean, seriously, you cannot. Or old man, either one of those.
Old man game.
He's got an old man game. Yeah. He's got a YMCA game. It's the same basic thing. I feel like.
You know what? I'm gonna call him OG Ryan Young. That's what I'm gonna call him.
That's not bad. Original game. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. All right. So moving on, David Ben Akiva. Man, David is one of the top posters on the Duke Basketball Report forums. He said his prediction is that Duke will win the ACC regular season by 2+ games. And by the way, J.W. Barnhill, who's a listener to the podcast, was on this same train. He said Duke would go undefeated, in which case I think they'll probably win the ACC regular season by at least 4 games. So what do you think of these? First of all, Duke winning the ACC regular season by 2+ games and Duke going undefeated in the ACC regular season.
Look, do not mistake what I'm about to say as me wanting this to happen, because obviously when I approach a season, I literally look at every game and say Duke can win every one of these games. They can go 40-0. And when we lose, it's always expected because I'm like, hey, I don't think we're going to go undefeated, but I don't see where that loss is happening because every game we can win. Having said that, to win the ACC by 2+ games, I'm giving that more like a 20% chance. Like, yeah, sure, it could happen. But the ACC has been competitive for a long time. Just every single year, where no matter how good or bad people think that, some of these teams are, it always ends up where the top is very, very jam-packed entering that final weekend of play. So I'm going to put that at like 20, let's say 20%. We'll put that there. For going undefeated, I'm putting that at like 3%. It's super, super difficult. What is it? Only one team has done it in ACC play, and that's the 99ers. It's super difficult to go undefeated in conference play. I'd love for it to happen, but I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, and there are more games played in conference play now than there were back then.
Right, there's 20.
But I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. First of all, Duke winning the ACC by 2+ games. Yeah, I'm absolutely there. This Duke team is really, really good. We haven't had. I mean, look, we've talked about this a lot. We haven't had NBA first-round draft pick level talent come back to Duke in a long, long, long time. I think we forget how much better these great freshmen are going to be now that they are sophomores. I also don't think we've had this kind of depth on a Duke team. I don't know. Like, we've talked about the 99 team, maybe since the 99 team, where Pete Gillen of Virginia famously said Taman Domzalski doesn't even play for Duke. If Taman Domzalski was at Virginia, we would erect a statue to him. That's how much depth Pete Gillen said Duke had in 1999. This Duke team strikes me as similarly incredibly deep. So I'm going to say winning the ACC by 2+ games, I'm going to do about 40% on that. That seems like a crazy number, but I really think that this Duke team is going to be outstanding. And I'm also going to have a little higher number that I agree, going undefeated. Super, super difficult. I'm going to give that about maybe 8%. That's about where I am on that, which most years I'd be at like 2%, but I'll go about 8%. You could maybe even talk me to 10% because I really think this Duke team is something special, but the ACC has enough other good teams that there's just no way you can get all the way through the conference race completely undefeated.
I think the other thing about that is just, going undefeated in the ACC would be terrific. Going undefeated in March and April is what I want. So if that means we're losing one game in the middle, I say the dog days of January, I'll take that so that we go. If you tell me you can trade that for undefeated March and April, give it to me.
By the way, all the teams nationally who've like gone undefeated in the regular season always end up losing in the NCAA tournament. St. Joe's did it once. The Kentucky team in 2015 did it.
Since 1976, no one has gone undefeated. But also every team, there was also some stat like every team, I think until like maybe recently, a team that had 30 wins entering March didn't win the NCAA tournament. So it's like you almost want to, like, I don't want to say want, but there's almost a thing where it says it's good to lose just so you understand what it's like, so you never have to do it again.
Let's move on to the next one. Urinal Cake, a fine poster on the DBR forums, says no one on the team will average 30 minutes per game. I think this is a really interesting
That's
one.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, like, until he mentioned it, I hadn't really thought about that. But man, I think that's a fascinating one. Unfortunately, I'm only going to give it about a 15% chance of happening. I feel like Kyle Filipowski, there's not as much competition at his position. He's going to go between the 4 and the 5 at times. I feel like Kyle didn't have a lot of foul trouble last year. Now, a lot of that was probably Derek Lively, cleaning up stuff in the post. So foul trouble could limit this, but I feel like Kyle Filipowski is going to average 30 minutes per game. I just feel like that's pretty likely. And then the other guy, I think Mark Mitchell may come really close to 30, if not going over 30 minutes per game, because I mentioned on the last podcast, we were talking about Jaden Schutt and how much I thought he was going to play. Part of that is because I don't see a lot of other guys who can sort of play that wing forward position for Duke, other than Mark Mitchell. So those are, I could probably make a case for Tyrese Proctor and Jeremy Roach too. but I, like I said, I'm going like 10, maybe 15% that we don't have anyone who averages 30 minutes per game. What do you think?
I think it's 10%. Yeah, I'm with you in the sense that someone is going to get 30 minutes, and I think multiple people get 30 minutes. And this is the stat that, like, injuries don't hurt you, right? Like if you are injured, and we don't want injuries, but if someone's injured and they sit out a couple of games, that only helps their minutes per game, right? Like they don't get dinged because, Zion Williamson had, what was it, 35 minutes a game or whatever it was, and he sat out like for 6 games because he was hurt.
Exactly.
The injuries didn't help him in that. It just only helped. The only thing that hurt him was that UNC game where he got hurt very early and didn't come back into the game. Like, that is the only thing that can really affect a minutes per game scenario. So yeah, I think at least, two guys are going to get, maybe 3, because it just seems like how it works. Some guy is going to, kind of announce himself as the alpha on this team in a way. They're going to get the bulk of the minutes.
All right, I got another fascinating one for you. Sky Bricky chimes in with this one. Jared McCain will average more points per game in ACC play than Jeremy Roach or Tyrese Proctor. And Tyrese Proctor. So Jared McCain, a bigger scorer in ACC play than Jeremy Roach and Tyrese Proctor. Donald, give me a percentage, baby.
This is tough. This is just straight off of the cuff, 15%. I don't think he's going to get more playing time than Proctor or Roach. And because of that, it's very difficult. I mean, hey, he could be super efficient. Again, if he comes in and bangs in 5 or 6 threes in 15 minutes, cool. We'd love that. But I just don't see that happening because I don't think he's going to have enough time on the floor to get the number of shots that's going to be necessary to compete with those two who are going to be taking quite a few shots and have the ball in their hands quite a bit. So yeah, I'm going to say 15%. I'm honestly could go lower than that, but I'm just going to stick with 15.
Yeah, I'm lower than you. I'm at about 10% on this one. And look, obviously injuries could play a role in this. If God forbids, Proctor or Roach gets hurt, then the odds of this go up significantly. But I think, hopefully, knock on wood, if there are no injuries, I'm with you. I just don't see McCain getting enough minutes. I also think people forget how good of a scorer Jeremy Roach was at times last year. And I'm sure
down the stretch.
Yeah. I mean, he took over games in the second half routinely last season. And he is a senior. He is way older than the other guys of this roster, other than Ryan Young. And I think it's easy. I think because he doesn't have the NBA pedigree that some of these other guys do, to think, oh, Jeremy Roach, sort of forget about Jeremy Roach. Dude, I'll be real surprised if Jeremy Roach isn't averaging 14 plus points per game this year.
Just so we're not always talking about injuries that we do not want, knock on wood, I'm just going to say foul trouble. Okay. So there's going to be opportunities for Jerry McCain and Caleb Foster to get more minutes than Tyrese Proctor and Jeremy Roach if they get into foul trouble. And we've seen that part, right? We've seen Jeremy Roach get 2 quick fouls, and that's not necessarily his fault. That's going to happen over the course of the season. Everyone's going to need to be ready to play because that can come up. And again, we go back to minutes per game, that can reduce the minutes if you're sitting on the bench because you have 2 fouls in the first half or 4 in the second. I think when we talk about Jeremy Roach and Tyrese Proctor, as of right now, and obviously this can change because we have a long season ahead of us, those two are going to have the ball in their hands at the end of the game. Those two guys are going to be the ones on the floor at the end of the game. That's, we talk about clutch minutes. I know that was a stat that part of the stat game last year. We talk about clutch minutes. These guys are going to have clutch minutes, and that is where they're going to rack up minutes and points over Jerry McCain and even Caleb Foster, because as of right now, when it comes time to the inside the 5 minutes and we're down by 4 or we're up by 4, those two guys are not going to have the ball in their hands, and they're not. Maybe one of them is not going to be on the floor because the other two, Roach and Proctor, are going to have the lion's share of the minutes. They're going to have the lion's share of the ball in their hand, and we've seen how they perform in clutch time. I wouldn't count them out.
All right, we're almost done with our wild predictions from the listeners, from the audience. Foster Coach K has this one. Mark Mitchell will win ACC Player of the Year. I'm going to go first on this, Donald. If he put a D in front of that, ACC Defensive Player of the Year, I'd be up in the 60, maybe 70% range. I just don't think, first of all, I don't think that the folks who vote on ACC Player of the Year, they don't consider defense enough for Mark Mitchell to get there, I think. And I'm having trouble seeing Mark Mitchell putting up the kind of points, the kind of gaudy offensive statistics that it's going to, like, Mark Mitchell's a glue guy, and glue guys win championships. They don't win Player of the Year awards. And that's a pity because you can't win it without a glue guy like Mark Mitchell, a dude who does everything for you. But I just don't think his stats are going to be there. I'm going to go like 5% on this. I just think it's super, super unlikely. But like I said, if it was ACC Defensive Player of the Year, I'd be up in the 60s.
I'm going to go 10% on the Player of the Year. But Jason, can I add to this prediction to boost it up? Not only will he win ACC Defensive Player of the Year, but he's going to be in the top 3, maybe even win the National Defensive Player of the Year awards. Like, that's where I think we're going with this. And in that regard, I will adding that to this prediction of Player of the Year. I'm going to add that and just make it one big prediction. I'm going to say 35% with all of that. If you take out the defensive part, then it drops down to like 10. But if you add the defensive part, I'm putting at 30% because I think people now know what we knew last year, that Mark Mitchell can defend his butt off, and him being on the floor in crunch time as a defender is something that no team wants to see. And the fact that Tennessee saw that there was no Mark Mitchell in the lineup, they knew that they could expose us in many ways on the defensive end when we were on defense. So I'm saying that this man right here is going to get the love on the defensive end. He is going to win ACC Defensive Player of the Year and be in the top 3 for National Defensive Player of the Year.
I love it. That's a good prediction, and you're right in there. 30% is about the number I think on that, because that's heady. That's a big time spot to be. Anyway, hey, wrapping up, I just did want to mention this one thing. There are a bunch of folks who wrote to us or posted on the DBR forums about predicting that Duke will not win at NC State. Donald, explain that prediction to the masses.
Yeah. So first of all, I think it was a response to not just the wild predictions, but us kind of talking about which ACC road game we would want to do this year. And I mentioned NC State because I'd love to beat them at NC State for once, which I still believe that. But a lot of people are saying that NC State, they predict that we're going to lose at NC State because the last 2 times that we won a national championship, we went to NC State and we lost. And it was the only meeting that we had against NC State in those 2 years. So I think they're kind of bringing that up to say, hey, if the stars align and we want to win a national championship, we got to do what the blueprint says. And the blueprint says we go to NC State in our only meeting and we lose. Now, I am not one to wish for any Duke team to lose any game. I just talked about this. And so I am going to vehemently disagree with all of them out there, even though I know the karma.
We're not doing a prediction on that. We're not doing a prediction.
I'm going to
percentage is
0%. I hope this never happens. I hope we go. And honestly, I hope when the schedule comes out next week and we see what date it is and I can get down there, I hope I'm in the building for it. I want to see their faces when we just expose them and murder them in front of everybody. And then call Sports Center and talk to Scott Van Pelt and tell him what happened if he didn't see it for the record. I hope that happens. But, hey, we could also lose. And if we do, I guess there's some silver lining in it.
We can't lose. We just both said it's 0%. It can't.
Okay, then it's happening. And we're always right. Even when we're wrong, we're right, because we could have been wrong.
Amen, brother. All right, so we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we look ahead to a big weekend for Duke football. Okay, wait, that's in 2 weekends. We're going to look ahead to what's happening this weekend for Duke football. Duke against UConn. Man, would that be great on the basketball field? Unfortunately, it's on football. But we'll have a preview coming up after this break.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
We're back from the break, and it's time to look ahead to Duke's game this weekend against the UConn Huskies in football. UConn, by the way, 0-3 and 144th in the Sagarin rankings. They are basically like a upper middle kind of FCS opponent, 1AA, whatever you refer to those teams that aren't in the major conferences. That's sort of what UConn is. They are, by the way, an independent. They're not in any conference. But Duke is favored in this game, according to Las Vegas, by 21 points, even though it is a road game, Duke's first road game of the season. Blue Devils are a 21-point favorite. I have seen some folks making projections that they think Duke should be picked by 30 points in this game. Wow. Donald, what you got? Tell me a little bit about what you're thinking about with this game. And by the way, you're not allowed to mention Notre Dame yet. No mentioning Notre Dame till the very end. We'll talk about them at the end.
Okay. So I will try to reserve my comments on Notre Dame, but I will say that the reason why, yes, UConn is not great this year, but UConn is still a Division I opponent. We're not going to visit the Lafayette Leopards, right? We're going to visit the UConn Huskies. Of course, on the basketball court, we got beef with them, and on the gridiron, we haven't seen them that much. But what I want to see from Duke in this game is to make sure that this is not a trap game. I want to get that clear. And I'm not talking about next week. I want them to go up there with the mindset that, hey, we got one team on our plate. We're going up here. We're going to go into Rentschler Field. We're going to just absolutely beat the pants off of them. We're going to eat some dinner, and we're going to go back home and make this the business trip that other teams do when they go on the road to places that they know they should win. I think the key here, Jason, is taking care of the football. As of right now, UConn through 3 games only has one takeaway. They have a fumble recovery. That's it. No interceptions. And Riley Leonard, to his credit, has done great at taking care of the football. Or, I think we had a couple of fumbles over the, past couple of weeks that, we can, we've
been cleaning it up. It was worse against Clemson. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've had some, we've had those games, and hopefully those are out of our system. And I think taking care of the football is going to be the key, because what we've done all year, the great thing about it is that we haven't had any momentum killers, really. Like, the only real momentum killer that we kind of had was that first game against Clemson where we muffed the punt and they scored a touchdown, but we recovered from that. I think other than that, we have really taken care of the football, and also we've taken the football away, which has been great. I think winning the turnover battle is key. I think for us, limiting the number of big plays that UConn has to give them any type of momentum, take them out of the game early. Like, that's the key. Take them out of the game to the point where by halftime, everybody who's at the rent is going back out into the parking lot to tailgate again because the game is over. That's what we want to see. And I think to do that, a run a game, just like it was this past week, needs to be on point. But also, Riley Leonard can take his shots downfield with this UConn defense. Take some shots downfield. Take some chances. And I'm not saying throw the ball in the triple coverage, but hey, have the game plan, do it where you kind of run, do some 9-9-9s, have some hot routes, and send some guys deep. Air it out, because you're going to catch them on one of them. And when you do, those are the back-breaking plays that will lift our team and demoralize theirs. So that's what I'm looking for against this UConn team. Like you said, Jason, they aren't great, but that doesn't mean that I don't worry about this game, only because we are going to a Division I team, a team who has been decent years past, but in this independent style of football that they're playing, they'll take on anybody. And the fact that they are going to be up and ready for this game because they consider us a rival in everything, I want us to be ready to match that intensity. And if we can do that, we're the better football team, and we should win.
All right, Donald, I got a couple things on this. First of all, you mentioned that they've been decent in years past. UConn played in a bowl game last year. To play in a bowl game, you need to win 6 games. Do you know the 6 games they won last year? Get ready for this murderer's row of victories. They beat Central Connecticut, Fresno State, Florida International, BC, ACC team, BC. It was a 13-3 game. Ugly, horrible game. UMass and Liberty. I'll give that list to you again. Central Connecticut, Fresno State, Florida International, BC, UMass, and Liberty. Ugh, that is really not good. That
now, Jason, you mentioned the 13-3 game. I will say that through 3 games this year, they have scored 45 points total.
Yeah, they're not.
That is not a lot of points. So yes, keep them off the scoreboard. That's obviously key. But the fact that they like to take these games and kind of grind them down in the dirt to make it where you don't score, that's what we have to avoid.
Yeah. So by the way, by winning those 6 games, they got the right to play in the Myrtle Beach Bowl. Myrtle Beach, fabulous in the spring and summer. Not so much in December. Anyway, they played in the Myrtle Beach Bowl against Marshall, and they lost by 2 touchdowns. Last year, UConn was not a very good bowl team, and this year they are way, way worse. Their QB got hurt a couple games ago. They've been rolling with their backup QB, a guy named Taquan Roberson, Roberson, I should say. He was originally at Penn State, but he really isn't super experienced in terms of gameplay, and if you look at his stats, he's not very accurate in terms of throwing the ball. He was supposed to be their starter a year ago, but he hurt his knee pretty badly, missed basically the entire season. And there are a lot of UConn people who think he still is not confident running, cutting, and doing all the athletic kind of things on his knee today. This UConn team is a sloppy team. They average 62 yards of penalty per game. That is a lot. By comparison, Duke only averages 28 yards of penalties. So this UConn team, you already mentioned the turnovers. They are -3 in turnover, in turnover margin on the season through 3 games. So this is a team that turns the ball over, doesn't get turnovers from the opposition, and commits a lot of penalties. And then, Donald, you mentioned this as well, but I'm going to put some numbers behind it. The biggest key to this game is the rushing attack. Duke averages a ridiculous, outstanding 242 yards rushing per game. I'll give you that number again. Duke is averaging 242 yards rushing per game. UConn is giving up, on average, 180 yards per game. 180 is bad. If teams are getting close to 200 yards on the ground, you're probably in trouble. Duke usually steamrolls over that number. That 200 is sort of a magic number. If you're rushing the ball, if you get 200 yards on the ground, you're in really good shape. I think this is going to be a game where Duke is going to pound them on the ground again and again and again. UConn's done, by the way, a very poor job of containing opposing quarterbacks. Newsflash: Riley Leonard can run with the ball, and
he's good.
Yeah, he's good at that. I just think this sets up very, very poorly for UConn. And now that we've talked about UConn, Donald, I am opening the floor. We are allowed to discuss the fact that this is a huge trap game for Duke because they have to, even as much as the coaching staff says, don't do it. They're looking ahead at Notre Dame. It has been announced, people, if you've been under a rock and you haven't heard it, it has been announced that the Duke Notre Dame game next Saturday will be played at 7:30 p.m. prime time and aired on ABC TV. Donald, I don't know the last time that a Duke game was in prime time on a national, I'm not counting ESPN.
I can tell you.
When was it?
It was the ACC championship game against Florida State, because those were on
good
ABC.
Good call. You are correct, sir. I was thinking regular season, not counting bowl games and stuff like that. Regular season. It has been a long, long time since the Blue Devils were in prime time on ABC, CBS, or NBC or Fox for a regular season game. I mean, wow. This is just such a huge matchup. People are already talking about in the history of Wally Wade. Like, where does this rank? I think this is arguably, especially if Notre Dame beats Ohio State this weekend, this is arguably the second biggest game in the history of Wally Wade. The biggest game being the time that they hosted the Rose Bowl. They were afraid during World War II. They moved. I want to say it was like
1942.
Yeah,
and Duke played in that game.
Yeah, they were afraid of holding the Rose Bowl on the West Coast because of Japanese submarines during World War II, and they moved it over to Durham and they held it at Wally Wade. That has to be hosting the Rose Bowl has to be the biggest game in the history of Wally Wade. I think this could be number 2. That's how big a game it is. And last thing, Donald, before you comment on Notre Dame, Mike Elko had a great quote this week. He said, "We talk all the time that anytime you take the game of football for granted, it will find a way to humble you really, really quickly." He is driving into these guys' heads. Do not look ahead to Notre Dame. Do not take UConn for granted. Coach, I hear you. I'm trying. I'm really trying, but I'm not sure I can get there.
Hey, you know what? I honestly am not focused on Notre Dame. That is going to be a big game, and we will have all week to think about it. When it comes to UConn, again, I always look at this game, and when I think about teams that we're playing, I think about the intensity that can be matched, right? And I think the fact that UConn and Duke have that history on the basketball court, UConn, again, they consider us rivals in everything. It's one of those things where, yeah, sure, we're looking at the basketball court. They're looking at everything. And because of that, they're going to come out and say, hey, they're not going to, when the newspapers or whatever, the online article is going to be, they want it to say UConn beats Duke. They don't care what sport it's in. And we need to come out and match that intensity, saying, hey, you want to come box with us? Cool. We know how to fight. And I think that's what it's going to be. The intensity levels got to be matched. When we put the talent levels aside, the intangibles need to be done and they need to be focused on. That's where the trap comes in, is if we don't take care of those intangibles, doesn't matter who we're playing next week or the week after that. Doesn't matter next week's homecoming, and that, arguably one of the greatest programs in college football history is coming to town. Does not matter. What matters is what's in front of us. We can only take care of what's in front of us, and that is going to East Hartford, Connecticut, beating UConn, and making sure that they don't have any problems understanding who the better team is, and then getting back down. Then we can talk about next week.
I love that attitude. I wish I could be with you. I'm trying. Like I said, I'm trying, man. And I'm not looking past UConn because I'm excited for the game, because I think the Duke may put up some gaudy stats in this game.
By the way, this game, just mentioned how next week is on ABC. This game is on, I believe, CBS Sports Network. So yeah, as we said last week, check your local listings. Some of you may not have that channel. I do, but some of you may not. CBS Sports Network, I believe it's a 3:30 kickoff.
It is. That is correct. You've given the people all the proper information. All right. So we are done. Again, thanks to all of you who wrote to us at dbrpodcast@gmail.com. We appreciate it. We read a bunch of them here on the air and we talked about them. For Donald, I am Jason. Go out and support your Duke Blue Devils. If you have not bought tickets for that Notre Dame game, that stadium better be full of blue, not green. People, this is serious. Do not let Notre Dame fans fill up Wally Wade. If you are anywhere within driving distance of that game, you got to go to that game. But first, we have to deal with UConn. I know. Sorry. I can't help it, man. I can't help it.
Also, you're going to need gear for that game. You're going to want to, if you don't have Duke Blue, you can buy it at Fanatics using our affiliate code. You can also buy it at Home Field Apparel, DBR Podcast. Enter that code at checkout. If it's your first time, you're going to get 15% off and you help support the show. It's a win-win situation and you're going to look good doing it. That's the best part.
Ooh, I love it. Very well done, Donald. Very well done. For Donald, for missing Sam, I am Jason. And here's the Duke Band to play us out and take us home. So before we begin, like I told you, I was at the dentist today. That is no fun. The dentist, not fun.
I don't go because it usually so here's the thing. I always found this, right? Like every single time I go to the dentist, and last time I went to the dentist was probably like 2 years ago. I have a fake tooth, so I had to get it like reattached essentially, like it's like re-screwed or whatever. And every time they come in, they're like, it's like going to get your oil changed, right? You go, hey, I just need an oil change. And they go, oh no, your tires are messed up. Oh, your carburetor's messed up. Oh, we found a leak. That's going to be $47,000. You should probably get this done today. It won't take too long, I promise. Like that sort of thing. So every time I go to the dentist, they're like, oh, you have a cavity. Oh, you have like 3 cavities over here. You got 2 over here. We can fix that for you. No problem. And so mistake was the last couple times I went to the dentist, they're like, hey man, you have a cavity and we're going to fix that for you. I know you just want a regular cleaning, but we want to fix these cavities. But what they don't know is that I looked in my records because I have to have records because I have this fake tooth here.
Right.
And so they said, hey, you have a cavity on your front right tooth. And I was like, this one? He's like, yep. And I was like, that's fake. It's a fake tooth, bruh. I don't know if you looked at Then they said, oh, you have one in the molar over here. I was like, you mean the one that I already got the filling in? He was like, no, it doesn't have a filling. I'm like, man, all of my molars got fillings in them, bruh. Like, I don't know if you looked at the x-ray or if you looked at my mouth at all, but I know you probably went through the Rolodex and said, let me pick these teeth because everyone has cavities in these teeth, but it ain't me. So that was the last time I went to the dentist, like to actually get, a full cleaning.
All I know is it's an hour that I just do not enjoy.
Yeah. Oh, for real. You're just like, no. Mouth open. The worst before we get started, the worst is your mouth is open the whole time. They're clearly doing stuff to your teeth.
And they're asking you questions.
Thank you. Yes. How's life?
Yeah. One was like, so
comment, man.
Before we started, she was like, so have you done anything interesting lately? And I was like, oh yeah, I went to Iceland and Norway. It was really cool. So she's asking me questions about Iceland and Norway while she's got three metal things in my mouth, poking around, holding onto my tongue. The saliva.
And then they say, don't move. Then they say, don't move. Yeah.
I'm trying. What was the best thing about Iceland? I mean, come on.
DBR will never stand for the dentist basketball report ever.
No. I feel awful because I'm sure there's some dentists who listen to us who are perfectly good people.
Yeah, love the people. Actually, love the conversations. I just hate that they have the worst timing for these conversations.
Yep. There we go. We got some good post-credit content there.
All it took was a dentist.
Exactly.